This is Allie Dill, and I have chosen to do my Turning the Book on its Head project on Pride by Ibi Zoboi. Pride is an adaptation of the great novel Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. It is about an intelligent young black woman named Zuri Benitez who is prideful of her heritage in her small home with her parents and four sisters. She meets a young man named Darius Darcy who has just moved across the street in a mini mansion that is the start of the gentrification of Bushwick. Zuri has a predetermined opinion of the Darcys and views of them as being too prideful of their money and lifestyle. But she soon finds out that she is too prideful as well, too prideful of her heritage to accept outsiders such as Darius. I chose to use this book for my project because I have read Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, and it is one of my favorite books. So it was very hard for me to really get invested in this adaptation and understand the meaning of it. But after thinking about it, I realized that Pride and Prejudice displays single stories being turned around through class, and the book Pride does this as well as race. Pride is an important piece of literature because it has made Jane Austen's story relatable to anyone of any background. For my project, I have chosen to draw the street that Darius and Zuri live on. On the left is my interpretation of Zuri's home, while on the right is my interpretation of Darius's home. This may not be exactly how it was described in the book, but this is the image that I had in my head while reading because I felt as though Zuri saw the houses so distinctly different. On Zuri's house, I have chosen two quotes that speak to the single stories that relate directly to Zuri and her family's background. On Darius's house, I have done the same with quotes that relate directly to him and his family. In the middle, or the road, I have squeezed a couple of quotes to demonstrate how both Zuri and Darius have changed their single stories of one another into counter stories and have relinquished their pride. To start off, on Zuri's house, I have the quote, "We have more space and less time, and the love of our whole neighborhood now only fits into this wood-framed house in the middle of a quiet block. We don't know the people who live across the street or on either side of us." This quote speaks to the single story that Zuri has conveyed that other people have about her and her family and people living in Bushwick. People who live in Bushwick that don't have money are supposed to be sad and constantly working and wondering what ifs constantly. Zuri has made the single story turn around through her description of the culture that surrounds her and the family that has formed through her place of living. Just because they have a larger space to live in and a little more money does not mean that she preferred to live there instead of her small home back in Bushwick. Through this, though, she is perpetuating another single story about people and communities that may have more money. I think it would be interesting to see her perspective of their new home after a few years of living there, after her family has been able to become more accustomed to the people who live around her. They may have a new close community and connections. The next quote that I have chosen for Zuri's house is, "We are not supposed to be proud. We were not supposed to love these things so hard. But I've never known anything else. These broken things all spell home to me." This also speaks to a single story that Zuri has conveyed that other people have about her and her family and people living in Bushwick. Outsiders may view her home and the things that she owns and loves to be broken or worthless, but it is all that she has known and she loves them. The reader can only assume that at the end of the book, Zuri is accepted into Howard University. She has been able to get as far as she has through the broken things and the home and culture that she loves so much that many others don't understand. This quote also speaks to Zuri's pride and her ignorance to the world outside her. She is so stuck on being prideful about her background that she is unable to recognize that Darius's background is just as acceptable. It is just different. He still has his hardships that she may not understand. Jumping over to Darius's house, the first quote that I chose for that one was, "You do know there are black people who have money out in the world, Z, right?" This is a quote from Janae to Zuri. It demonstrates that Janae understands Zuri's isolation in Bushwick and her disconnection from life outside of what Zuri experiences in her small neighborhood. Even though Zuri does not realize it yet, Janae is wanting to help Zuri open her eyes to the relevant counterstories of many black families. Just because they live in a poor place where lots of black families live, that does not necessarily mean that other black people are also poor or that they should be or act poor in order to be accepted by people of the same skin color. A color of a person's skin does not always mean just one thing. The next quote that I have chosen for Darius's home is, "It's a truth universally acknowledged that when rich people move into the hood, where it's a little bit broken and a little bit forgotten, the first thing they want to do is clean it up." This is the very first line of the novel, and from research, the most popular quote from the novel. Because gentrification is so real right now, this statement resonates with so many people. Zuri is incredibly proud of her Bushwick hood exactly the way it is, and instantly resents the rich new neighbors who move in. Darcy does not fit in her neighborhood, and Zuri fears that people like his family will contribute to the kind of gentrification that will destroy everything Zuri loves about her home. Darcy proves that is not his or his family's intent. They were judged in their last home for being too black, and now they are being judged for not being black enough, or the kind of black that Zuri accepts. Now to move on to the middle, or the road, I have chosen the quote at the bottom of it. "We're not going to just throw away the past as if it means nothing. See, that's what happens to whole neighborhoods. We built something, it was messy, but we're not going to throw it away." This is said by Zuri towards the end of the book when both Darius and Zuri are admitting to have judging the other when first meeting. Darius goes on to say later that, "But I have lived in your neighborhood. I haven't thrown anything or anyone away." Zuri starts to understand that Darius did not choose to have money. It's just how it is, and he shouldn't be ashamed or feel bad about that. He has gotten judged because of his race, the same way that she has. Money has had nothing to do with it, or changed outsiders' minds about him. Instead of constantly being prideful of their background and judging one another, they can accept their differences and learn from one another to live better lives in the future, which is what Bushwick and other communities have come to do, working with the past and the present to create a better future. Another quote that I've chosen for the middle is at the top. "My neighborhood is made out of love, but it's money and buildings and food and jobs that keep it alive. And even I have to admit that the new people moving in with their extra money and dreams can sometimes make things better. We'll have to find a way to make both sides of Bushwick work." Throughout the book, Zuri fears that more money will push people out of their neighborhood, but eventually acknowledges the statement. She's accepting that there are other people out there who have obstacles to overcome as well. It is not just her and her family community. She has stepped out of her Bushwick bubble and has witnessed the counter stories of people like Darcy who are the outsiders, but just want to fit in, same as everyone else despite coming from money. There are also people like Warren, who she thought was her kind of people, but ended up just playing the game. And this quote ties into the last quotation. "I have always thought of Bushwick as home, but in that moment I realized that home is where the people I love are, wherever that is." This is a good quote to end on because it wraps everything together. Instead of Bushwick being a state of rich versus poor, and the thought of it having a unique culture that no outsider can understand, it becomes just a place where people live. Zuri realizes that she carries her culture with her and the people with her. She and the people that influence her can move anywhere and it'll become home. This statement is true for anyone of any race and of any class. This is a quote that captures the intention behind this novel and the lesson that Zuri learns from her experiences.